today. Be a very exciting, I think, very exciting and lively discussion. I am the founder and CEO of the Indiana IoT Lab, as well as Launch Fishers, and we've participated in many ways and also been beneficiaries of some great work that's being done here in the state around 5G, and that's the topic of our discussion today. We're here to talk about how we are positioned as a state to be leaders nationally and what kind of work is being done, but also what kind of support we can offer this initiative through legislative support, policy changes, et cetera. And so we're excited to talk about these important strides that have been made over the last handful of years. And want to especially give a shout out to one of our panelists here today, State Rep Ethan Manning, who has been a real workhorse in helping gather support around this initiative around 5G, and specifically around our 5G zone. We will also be joined a little bit later by Sean Hendrix, who will be here to give us an update on what's happening downtown with the 5G zone. And then we also have leaders from AT&T and Verizon here, Bill Soards and Melia Carter. We will go around here for introductions here in just a second. Last little bit of a commercial here for ITIA. We are here to be a voice for Indiana's innovation economy, to make sure that we have a collective voice and a consistent voice at the State House and with our executive leaders here in the state. And so we believe it's important not only to speak up when asked, but also to apply consistent pressure to make sure that Indiana reaches its full potential in this next wave of the innovation economy. So with that, I'd like to invite our guests to do a brief introduction, a minute or two each, and we'll start off with State Representative Ethan Manning. Ethan, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you so much, John. Good morning, everyone. Just want to note that I saw a few of my legislative colleagues in the attendees. Looks like we have maybe Senator Boots and Representatives Nagel, Baird, and Pierce. So good morning to the other legislators we have on the call as well. But my name is Ethan Manning. As John mentioned, I do represent House District 23, which includes portions of Miami, Cass, and Fulton counties. And I serve as Vice Chairman of the House Utilities, Energy, and Telecommunications Committee.
You're on mute, John.
All right, thank you. I muted to make sure that I didn't accidentally interrupt, and thank you very much. So, and then Melia with Verizon, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Thank you, John. My name is Melia Carter. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for Verizon. I handle 6 states, which is basically the Midwestern states for Verizon. And I've been in the business, I won't age myself, but, let's just say over 20 years in the business. And, I've worked on broadband since the very beginning of, going back to the Telecommunications Act of 1996. So have kind of followed the technology from the beginning until where we are now.
Very nice. Kindergartner adopter of 5G then. So she started early. And so welcome. Thank you, Melia.
And Indiana is one of my states, and I have to put a plug. It's probably my favorite state in the Midwest because we've got great policies and great people here.
Nice to hear. Thank you so much. All right, Bill Soards, and then Sean will come to you for an intro after Bill.
Morning, John. Good morning, everybody. Hi, my name is Bill Soards. I'm the Indiana president for AT&T. I've been lifelong. I was born and raised in Indianapolis. My AT&T journeys have taken me a couple different places. I started with the company here in Indianapolis doing government affairs at the State House. After about 7 years of that, I had the opportunity to move to Chicago, which is where I got to know Melia pretty well. So it's always nice to spend time with my Verizon colleague, Melia. And then after being in Chicago for a couple of years, I had the opportunity to move to Denver, Colorado, and serve as our state president in Colorado. I was a opportunity I really enjoyed, got really into the tech startup world and venture capital and innovation, and then moved back to Indianapolis about 8 years ago, where I've been ever since. And I live in Zionsville with my family. John, thank you.
Absolutely. All right, Sean, 5G zone. We're doing brief intros here. And I know Molly's going to have to unmute you now. I did the same thing accidentally. So we'll, and then Melia, I think.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. Awesome. So
Yeah, okay.
Sean, yeah.
Great. Well, thanks everyone. Sorry for the technical difficulties here, but Sean Hendrix, I'm CTO for 912 Institute and Executive Director of the Indiana 5G Zone. We're a nonprofit, industry-led innovation facility located in downtown Indianapolis. And really our role is to try to bring together the academic, government, and business communities to try to help us solve these challenges with getting 5G to market. 5G is a great technology. It's really enabling the digital transformation of everything that we're doing. We live in a very connected world, but that is changing even more so. We're becoming even more connected. However, with that connectivity comes challenges. There's software challenges, device challenges. Will we be doing networking at the edge in the cloud? And so our focus is really to convene these assets and try to work on these hard industry problems so that we can drive the adoption of the use cases, bring 5G to market as a commercially viable solution, and frankly, work to establish Indiana and the nation as a leader in the adoption of this technology.
Thank you very much, Sean. I'd like to kick us off. Melia, I'll come to you first. If you can offer us a high-level summary of when this technology became available, and what does this really mean for citizens and for business? What's 5G all about?
Well, 5G is the next generation in wireless technology. So if you look at the evolution of wireless, 1G technology brought us voice capabilities, 2G technology brought us texting, 3G brought us data, 4G brought us apps, and now we have 5G, which is bringing us things like artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things, which I'll touch on in a minute. But the exciting thing is Verizon was actually the first company in the world to launch 5G technology. We did start out, we were working with the industry on putting together 5G standards. And we did do an early launch of a version of 5G before the standards were official. And in that launch, Indianapolis was one of the first cities to receive it, in which, we were doing things like putting a competitive video offering out to compete with cable. And then when the standards came out, we were actually the first company in the world to launch 5G under the official standards, making it commercially available on April 3rd in 2019. And we actually beat Korea to that launch by like 2 days. Indianapolis was actually one of the first 5G cities to obtain this infrastructure under the new standards. As far as what 5G will do, we know it's got some tremendous capabilities. We know that it's going to be a change agent. I think, our CEO at Verizon, Hans Vestberg, always says that he considers it the fourth industrial revolution. And we're not sure of the full potential of 5G, but we do know that once we get it out there, innovation will flourish. We saw this happen with 4G. In 2009, when 4G was launched, no one knew that just by having an app on your phone would launch and be change agents for entire industries like Uber and Lyft and Airbnb and things like that. And those are common staples today that we just kind of take for granted. But that was all developed just by having the ability to put an app on the phone. But 5G has the capability to do near real-time data transmission, which makes things like self-driving cars, robotic surgeries, and real-time manufacturing technically possible now. So in the future, 5G technology, we know, is going to touch every single industry. And we're going to have things, we're already seeing things like smart appliances, smart cars, and smart homes. And in the future, that's going to become the norm and mainstream. And so Verizon announced in March that we're bringing, some of the things that we're doing, right now, we are partnering to bring this technology with manufacturers and different businesses and using it in a variety of ways. But we did announce in March that we are going to bring a home broadband service to up to 50 million households by 2024, which is 41% of the US. So I know companies like Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, we're all rapidly expanding and building out this technology and trying to get it out there as quickly as we can.
So thank you very much for that overview, Melia. Bill, I'd like to come to you because it was Verizon and AT&T that were the first two to offer 5G in Indianapolis, which made it the first major metropolitan area to have dual 5G carriers, kind of garnering some national attention for Indianapolis and for the state. What needed to happen in order to make that happen? What kind of policy changes have occurred over the last few years to make this possible?
Yeah, thanks, John. There's been probably 4 really significant pieces of legislation that the General Assembly has adopted over the last 6 or 7 years. I won't run through all of them in excruciating detail, but it's been a process, and I think a very strategic initiative of the state from various legislators and different governors to try to make sure that Indiana excels in technology broadly, but wireless plays a big part of that. I think back over the last 7 years about the authors who've carried, really major wireless legislation. Representative Cook, who's now Senator Cook, Senator Brant Hirschman, Representative Dave Ober, Senator Messmer, and Representative Manning. Those are, lead authors with that play an important role, but lots of co-sponsors and supporters all along the way. I mean, one of the interesting things about technology, John, is that they're very bipartisan issues. They're not political issues at all. And so that's one of the nice things, to be able to work in a space where there's wide agreement on the need for technology and advancement. But, I guess, prior to really 2010, there's not a lot of state law around wireless. Wireless is an industry that emerged, in the early 90s, late 80s. And it was all about, putting a giant antenna on top of a giant tower kind of out by the interstate. And in the early days of cellular, that was all you needed to kind of broadcast a really high-powered signal, just so that people could talk to each other. And then, over time, as people started migrating away from the traditional telephone network to depending more and more on wireless, it put tremendous demands on the wireless networks, and antennas needed to start moving out from the interstate to closer to where people were. And in fact, today, the latest statistic I saw was something like 8% of the population have and use a traditional telephone line in their home. And so we've just seen massive explosions, something to the effect of 330,000% increase in wireless traffic in just the last 10 years alone. And so, that's facilitated the need for a lot of legislation to try to streamline the process as it relates to whether it's building towers or, over the last few years, building small cells, to make sure that those antennas are in places where consumers need them to be, so that we can not only just make phone calls the way we need to be, but increasingly massive amounts of data. One of the significant pieces of legislation that we've all kind of referenced happened in 2017, courtesy of Senator Hirschman and Representative Ober. And this was the bill that first introduced small cells into kind of our lexicon in public policy. And again, for decades, we've been building those big towers out by the interstate, but now it was becoming apparent that we needed more antennas closer to where people were. And, local zoning laws and land use regulations don't allow for 300-foot towers in the middle of a neighborhood or near residential areas. Nobody wants that, and it would be overkill, quite frankly. And so, the industry developed this rather surgical approach of taking really small antennas and being able to attach them to light poles or to street lamps or existing utility poles or electric poles that are already there, to try to densify the cellular network to provide for the kinds of speeds that people are needing. That 2017 bill was Senate Bill 213. And in fact, it was so groundbreaking that members of the FCC and members of Congress came to Indianapolis after that bill passed and really heralded that bill as a national model. And it was an FCC Commissioner, Brendan Carr, who's still on the commission, that said, when it comes to wireless, Indiana is the future. And so that 2017 bill was really pretty groundbreaking in trying to begin the jockeying of states to position themselves for the 5G arms race, if you will. And as you mentioned, Indianapolis became one of the first 2 cities in the country to launch a 5G network, as we launched in Indianapolis, as did Verizon, and Austin, Texas was the second city. So, fast forward to most recently, 2021, House Bill 1164 just recently passed the legislature, authored by Representative Manning and sponsored in the Senate by Senator Messmer. Look, we find ourselves in a pandemic the last year and a half, and everybody is all about connectivity. And we know that not everybody in Indiana yet has a wired connection that's sufficient to support their school, their work, their healthcare, their education, all those kinds of things. And so the wireless network became this immediate emergency kind of connectivity piece. And the legislation this last year did things like streamline the processing so that wireless antennas could be sited on property that's owned by the state of Indiana, streamline some processes so that antennas could be located on school property. We had more than a half a dozen school districts around the state that desperately wanted new antennas, and we wanted to do deployments, but there were various procedures, public notice, and procedural things that had to occur that just facilitated nothing but delay, quite frankly. And so a lot of those things were cleaned up. We also now have kind of standardized ways for cellular towers to be located around the state. Historically, we've kind of had a patchwork quilt of restrictions on tower heights in certain areas or minimum separations between towers. None of them matched. They were all kind of different and, quite frankly, vestiges from the late 80s when towers first started being built. So all of that is cleaned up today. Look, make no mistake, the wireless industry and the wireless connectivity is only as good as the fiber, right? I mean, we all use our cell phones to communicate to an antenna, but every one of those antennas is connected all around the state by fiber optics. And so I think we're going to see an even greater focus on that moving forward, especially as Hoosiers across the state are desperate to get faster wired connections in their homes. But wireless played this really unique role over the last year and a half in kind of emergency communications for the short term. But everyone's bullish on 5G. We're all anxious to see where it goes. We need the people and the participants on this call and this ecosystem to help innovate and develop those next killer applications that are really going to take advantage of 5G. But Melia did a really good job, I think, explaining it. It's faster speeds, it's lower latency, and it's massive IoT capabilities like we've never had before. So again, Indiana's been just a tremendous leader in the public policy realm. I think DC policymakers have recognized that, and hopefully you've seen the industry respond in kind as we continue to roll out 5G across the state.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Bill. I think Melia and you are beginning to paint this picture that this is a platform for innovation, for entrepreneurs to step in and use this platform to develop the next killer apps and the next areas of innovation that could launch us into the forefront, not only nationally, but internationally, as we see these applications emerge. So Representative Manning, I'd like to come to you. Bill mentioned your legislation last year that helped advance 5G. Why are these efforts important, first of all, to the state? And what do you see as the current barriers to deploying more of this technology?
Thanks, John. And I hate to state the obvious, but it's important to the state because reliable high-speed internet, we're talking about 5G today, but wireless or wired, it's not the future anymore. It's the present, and our people expect it. When Melia and I were in kindergarten in 1996, when DREG happened, right, the internet was not quite so essential as it is today in our daily lives, not only, for fun and social media and all those things we do, but essential business that we conduct, whether it be telehealth or healthcare in some way, or anything that we can possibly imagine we can do online now. And so that's why it's so important. Outside the legislature, one of the things I do is work as a real estate broker. And every time I'm showing someone a house, after we've looked and seen, how updated the wallpaper is in the half bath, we pull out our phones and we check to see what the wireless service is like at this place, particularly in rural areas outside of town. Or if we're not getting great service, we're going to ask the sellers what type of internet service they are using. And people are making these types of decisions based on that alone, regardless of what the house or the property looks like. So that's why it's so important as we talk about overall economic growth and population growth with quality of life, quality of place. Wireless internet and wired, of course, are huge parts of that. So that's why we need to continue to be a leader. I'll just be quite candid with you. I'm also on the elections committee, and I spent Friday and Saturday at the redistricting hearings. And we heard from a lot of people talking about Indiana's not a leader in this, not a leader in that. And we heard a lot of kind of negative comments about Indiana, which was, painful to hear. But in this space, as Bill and Melia talked about, there's no question that we're a leader in wireless, and we need to continue to do that. To have the record of Indianapolis as the first 5G connected city in the country, that's amazing. And that type of innovation being at the forefront is what we need to continue. As Bill talked about, the challenges of having that backbone of fiber and the networks that we need, the actual physical infrastructure that we need to build in order to enable more deployment is the purpose of House Bill 1164. And it included several other things in addition to what he talks about. But we do hope that it solves some of the issues. Of course, the hot button issues on placing small cells is kind of what a lot of people focused on when we talked about 1164. I do think that we struck the right balance there. We're providing some collaboration up front, but also making it clear what areas really are true underground utility areas and what process should look like to place a small cell in those as opposed to all other areas. So some will disagree, of course, but I do think we struck the right balance, and hopefully 1164 will be a good step forward as we continue to deploy the technology.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Representative Manning. Sean, I'd like to come to you to talk a little bit about the 5G zone. This was launched in 2019, first of its kind public-private partnership to advance 5G across government, academia, industry, et cetera. You have a test lab there as well with IoT connectivity. How is 5G transforming physical industries like our manufacturing and agriculture in the state? And what kind of innovations are we seeing come out of the 5G zone?
Yeah, that's thanks, John. So, the team on the line has talked about, this excellent infrastructure and how it's no longer the future, it's here. But as you were mentioning, it's really while consumers are using it and people are starting to use it, the real opportunity is in this IoT connectivity. And maybe another way to say it is we haven't even really begun to really tap into the full capability of what these networks offer in terms of the data capacity and to take advantage of this low latency communication and massive connectivity, device connectivity that the network provides. And so the Indiana 5G Zone Lab is really, you can think of it as a sandbox, you can think of it as a development environment in order to help, again, this industry, government, academia, to learn how to use this new capability that's now being deployed in Indiana and nationwide. And so it's also a place to converge technologies. We talk about IoT, so the devices and the sensors that are coming on the networks that are going to help us see, sense, understand, and sustain the environment around us are absolutely critical. But the ability to then develop the applications. You hear people talk about edge computing. Along with these networks, we're going to see compute resources move and distribute all around our physical locations. And what this means is that we're going to be able to put machine learning and artificial intelligence capabilities to help us process the data and make it decision ready now that we're connecting these millions and millions of sensors. Now that sounds interesting, right? That's as the engineer in me really likes that, right? That sounds fun and interesting. But from a business perspective, it helps us develop, us in Indiana and us as a nation, to develop a competitive edge. When you look at industries like manufacturing, like agriculture, and I'll just mention, I've started to develop a perspective that agriculture is maybe just another way of looking at manufacturing. You know, it's all a process, right? And so the ability to connect the data, or to connect to the data and get the insights so that we can make decisions and learn how to improve our processes to make them more sustainable, more efficient, and ultimately improve our time to market, increase our quality, and lower our costs is going to give us the platform to expand our commercial sector as well. And having a laboratory where the software engineers, the device engineers, the network engineers can come together and work on these problems becomes very key.
Brings to mind an interesting point, Sean. You talk about this massive scale, right? Sensors and edge computing, and a lot of horsepower out there now on the network and including the network. Where does national security, defense, network security fit into this? And what kind of role are you playing at the 5G lab in that?
Sure. I think that the first comment I'll make is that from a network perspective, increasingly there's not such a thing as a national security network and a network for everybody else, right? We've seen recently, everybody knows about Colonial Pipeline. We've seen all the hacks and attacks over the last several years, and with increasing frequency and increasing impact, both financial and operationally. And so what we're starting to come to realize is that all of us, whether we're in national security or whether we're just a city government or a manufacturing operation, we all have to come at these connected applications from a zero trust perspective. And so what's that mean to us as networks? It means that we can establish the connectivity, we can establish the low latency, but if we haven't designed in security from the very start of the process, security at the IoT device level, security at the edge, security at the device or the network connectivity, then we are presenting vulnerabilities to potential adversaries to, I'll just say, do harm in whatever form or fashion they choose. And so, again, I think it's pretty obvious to a group like this that financial harm is increasingly impactful to what we're doing in our operations. And so from the 5G zone perspective, we've spent a lot of time working with security partners, encryption, cyber technologies that obfuscate or move around the front door of applications to make this, to kind of help provide assets into this zero trust environment.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Representative Manning, I'd like to go back a little bit, maybe go a level deeper on policy at the state level and how that marries up with what we just discussed there. What do you see coming down the pipeline, and what's going to happen in the next legislative session around 5G?
So I hope we won't have a whole lot of discussion on small cells. We had that big discussion this session, but of course, if things come up, those can be addressed then. But of course, as we look at next level connections, we put another $250 million in there. There's a lot of federal money. There's local money going into building out broadband all over the state, and of course, lots of private dollars. So we're just monitoring what's happening with those various grant programs and those build outs. So we'll see if anything comes of that. I'm personally working on a piece of House Bill 1164 that at the end of the session we just removed because we couldn't quite get there. But the idea was from various broadband providers and contractors that there are 1,000 different ways to get a permit to access a right of way in Indiana. There's 1,000 different ways to do permit fees, different ways you can submit in some areas electronically or online or via email. Other areas has to be a paper copy. You may have to submit it to 3 or 4 different departments within the same unit of government. So it's clear to me that there are some apparent issues there with particularly with local governments and accessing right of way and how we do that. Because of course, like we talked about, electric, water, sewer, all of those utilities have been there forever. Broadband's newer. And so we all have to learn how to share the right of way so we can all access it because, again, the public expects all of these services at this point in Indiana's history. So working on with a working group of people, including folks like AT&T and Verizon and the water utilities, electric utilities, local governments, we have a working group together to work on that section that we took out of 1164 to hopefully streamline statewide some of these processes. And again, with the idea of making it easier to get projects built. So that's what I'm working on for next session. And then we'll see what else comes up. Something always does, right?
That's the truth. I'd like to go to Bill and Melia. Maybe we'll start with Melia, and then Bill, you can pick it up. But AT&T and Verizon are taking different approaches to building out 5G by prioritizing different 5G services. Can you each talk to your strategies for deploying 5G and how they maybe differ from each other?
Well, let me first talk about where we're similar. I think if you look at, our companies wanting to do 5G deployments, we're looking at doing nationwide deployments. I mean, we want to get this stuff out here everywhere as quickly as we can. And I think the reason why both Verizon and AT&T chose Indiana as one of the first 5G cities, 5G states, is because they had such good progressive policies in this area. And I think, you're looking at thousands and thousands of cities we could have chosen across the country, and to choose Indianapolis as one of the first cities or the first city is really telling on the progress that the state has made to make companies like Verizon and AT&T see it as model deployment, model policies where, we can get our deployment out fast and, and without too much, too many roadblocks in getting it out there. So I think, that's kudos to the state for doing that. And I think with Representative Manning's most recent legislation, that does help further that. If you look at Verizon, and AT&T, we are both putting in the process with, the new C-band spectrum technology. We are in the process of putting 5G on those massive cell towers. But I think Verizon has a little bit of a different business plan, because we are doing more to put small cells out in communities. And the reason for that is twofold. When you look at the migration of the way technology is going, right now, the average household has 13 devices that are riding the internet. And we know that that's going to grow exponentially. I mean, 10 years from now, you might see 30, 40 devices in a household that are all connected online. And we have to have the capacity to handle that. And when we're building out a network, we're not building out a network for today. We're building out a network to ensure that we have the capacity out there in 10, 15 years from now, so that, you are having the capacity that that people need. And what small cells generally do is they take that capacity off those macro towers, those big macro towers, and they offload the capacity so that we can continue to have the speeds and the infrastructure in place to manage that traffic load. And what Verizon's doing that's a little bit different than AT&T is as part of this, one of the reasons why we are focusing more on small cell technology is because we are doing home broadband off of that wireless and home video. So we do have a video offering that we are offering in Indianapolis and other places where we are competing against the cable companies. We're offering $50 a month. I think that's, $50 a month. I think that might be the promotional fee, but to get streaming video and, part of that offering, you get Disney Plus and, Netflix and Hulu and all those apps. So that allow you to do streaming video. We are seeing a lot of, particularly the younger generation is cutting the cord from having your basic cable subscriptions, and they are migrating to streaming video services. So they're watching, movies and TV shows and things like that online now. So Verizon is in that market. We're also, doing home broadband through that offering. So it's pretty exciting. We've had a lot of success in that so far, and particularly in Indianapolis, and we're looking at making that even more robust as we go. But in order to ensure that we're continuing to have innovative products and services, and also meeting this continuous demand for data that's been exponentially growing for decades, we need to make sure that we're able to put the capacity out there and have the infrastructure in place to handle whatever comes up, the exaflood of data that comes up in the next 15 years from now.
Yeah, I will attest to the growth of the streaming media platforms. When my car was delivered, it came without AM, FM, or satellite, 100% streaming. And I was like, whoa, this is a really big shift. And you start multiplying that and thinking about all the vehicles in the world and all the households as they stream. It's going to be an incredible load on the network. So
right, and people don't even realize that, because they're like, my internet's fine today, I don't, and they don't realize, well, when you add 40 more applications in your house, you need to have that capacity in the network. And that's why we need to build it now, so that, we can have it there in place, and, we're not scrambling to deal with, some sort of network congestion issue down the road.
Yeah, that's a big challenge. Bill, how does AT&T see this coming into existence in everybody's lives, and how's it different than what we just heard?
Yeah, I agree with the way Melia kind of laid out our similarities and our differences between Verizon and AT&T. The way I like to explain it is, think about 5G as a 3-layer layer cake. This is really elegant compared to the way prior cellular technologies worked. But at the base layer, we have low band, mid band, and high band spectrum, all of which transmit 5G capability. That low band is lower frequencies, and you'll remember from your science classes, John, that the lower the frequency, the farther they travel. They give you really good coverage, but maybe not fantastic speed. So everybody's building this low band 5G out, Verizon and AT&T alike. And then there's this mid band, which is a little bit higher on the frequency chart. It doesn't go quite as far, but it gets much faster speeds. So I'd say AT&T and Verizon are both deploying low band and mid band to serve mobile customers, right? Cell phones, tablets, IoT, connected devices. I think where we differ is in the millimeter wave, that really high band frequency that only goes about a city block, right? You heard Melia talk about their strategy is to build that in neighborhoods so that that becomes a wireless pipe into your home for your internet surfing, your entertainment, and so forth. AT&T in Indiana is positioned a little bit heavier on the fiber side. We've got about 1.4 million miles of fiber in the state of Indiana, thousands of customers that have fiber to the home, tens of thousands more in the years ahead as we really focus on our fiber build in Indiana. And so instead of us focusing on that really high band for residential use, we're bringing that high band into areas of really dense customers like downtown Indianapolis, entertainment areas, airports, sporting venues, college campuses, places where the signal can't go very far, but has massive speed and massive capacity abilities. So that's probably where our strategy differs the most. And it's just because AT&T is planning on serving residential customers versus via fiber, as opposed to really high-speed 5G. So it's a strategy difference, but by and large, there's a lot of similarities. And it's fascinating to see how it's all going to shake out, right? But the one message I'd ask you to take away from that is 5G is so completely different from every other prior G. I mean, it was literally, you throw the signal on the spectrum and everybody uses it for voice and data. It's just kind of this conglomeration of traffic. Where it gets a lot more sophisticated in 5G, you can separate different types of traffic into different layers of the network. The latency is completely different. It's instantaneous. And there's so much more software baked into a 5G network than ever before. Wireless networks used to be so hardware intensive. On radios, you had to go swap out the new radios. If there's some new feature, chances are you had to buy a new box. These 5G networks that are being built across Indiana are incredibly intelligent and really software centric.
I'd like to open this up just a little bit and to the participants, if you have a question that you'd like to submit, there's an ability there to go ahead and submit a question, and Molly will curate those and we'll make sure that we get a few of those in here in the last 10 minutes or so. But I'd like to open it up to the panelists now to ask you just a very broad question. What is it that most excites you about this technology, and where do you see us in the next 5 to 10 years? And that's whoever would like to take that first. Melia, you want to jump in?
I think there's going to be a ton of innovations in every industry, but personally, I think the biggest breakthroughs are going to be in healthcare and nutrition. And, we are already seeing apps that will only become better, that can detect if you're having, a heart attack, or, you have the ability for people to download their diabetes data and send it to their doctor to see if, they need to adjust their medication and things like that. So we're already seeing advancements there, but that's only going to grow. But I think really interesting is going to be in the area of nutrition. Verizon, every so often, we haven't had one since the pandemic, but prior to the pandemic, we have these team meetings with our executive levels and above. And, at one of those team meetings that I was at, they brought in a futurist. And it was so interesting. This is a guy that goes around the world and picks up trends and sees, where things are going and predicts where things are going. And one of the things he mentioned was that, 15 years from now, we will probably see the ability for data, and algorithms to detect your nutritional needs. So Bill and I could be in a restaurant and we both order a steak, and maybe his nutritional needs are that he needs more vitamin D, and my nutritional needs will be I need more calcium. And so they will be able to infuse his food with the nutrition that he needs, and my food with the nutrition that my body needs, based on, having the ability to have that capability to, detect what your body needs. That's not here yet, but I just thought that was so exciting to think about how healthier just having technology and data at your fingertips can just make us live longer and be healthier and have better medical care and nutrition. I think that's a really exciting field that will just take off once this technology is out there.
John, I think, if the last 20 years have been about digitizing music and movies and TV shows and really being disruptive in the media space, I think the next 20 years are all about the physical economy, kind of the legacy economy that Indiana has been built on for over 100 years. When you think about agriculture, manufacturing, and transportation logistics, like these things are square in the crosshairs of disruption and innovation. The next 20 years are going to be about driving greater efficiencies and productivity and really reforming all three of those physical economies. which are the bedrock of Indiana. And so you start thinking about how critical it's going to be that we have entities like the IoT lab and the 5G zone that are hopefully going to lean into this trend, because we're just at the beginning of that. I mean, 5G networks are going to transform the world, but it's this massive IoT deployment of sensors, gathering data, synthesizing that data, and driving new efficiencies into our economy. If you don't think the Indiana economy is going to be impacted in the next 20 years by the Internet of Things, you're sorely mistaken. And look, if we know we're going to be using these things, we need more companies and entrepreneurs on the front end developing these things. And so, I think we're oriented properly as a state, but it's going to take legislative leaders and all of us to continue to keep that dialogue and that education going. An IEDC that has the resources they need to focus on areas of opportunity and growth for the next few years. But I think everything we've ever known about the Indiana economy is subject to disruption in the next 20 years. And we've got just a phenomenal opportunity to try to bend that curve in the right direction.
Well, and to kind of pivot off of that point, Bill, that was one of the core tenets behind the creation of the IoT lab. Is we have this industry leadership in manufacturing, distribution, agriculture. Who better to innovate for that next generation in that industry than the people that are leading it today? We risk that being disrupted by someone else not in the industry, and we end up buying that technology from elsewhere in the world versus selling to the rest of the world from right here in Indiana. So one of the questions that came in is what's most important or most critical thing that we can do today to make sure that we remain at the forefront of this 5G technology rollout?
Look, I think we've done a lot of the supporting things. I mean, a lot of you, and ITIA itself has been really engaged in, expanding the venture capital tax credit, making sure it's transferable. Like the legislature has put more money into entrepreneurism in the last 5 years than in the last, 50, hands down. And that's in part because of organizations like this that have kind of rallied to that need and spending more time with policymakers, helping them educate about the changing dynamics in tech and innovation. I'd flip that back to you, John, and ask you kind of through the eyes of an entrepreneur, what more is needed over the next few years, because these state legislators have done yeoman's work in the last few.
I think it's there's an incredible opportunity. In fact, one of the other questions that came in was from a technical entrepreneur asking how do they participate? How do they get into this discussion, and how do they become part of the 5G ecosystem? Right. I mean, that's something I'm new to. I'd be curious, how do these entrepreneurs engage? Is it the 5G zone, Sean? What's the best way for people to get engaged?
Yeah, it's come see us, reach out to us. It's not as hard as you may think. And kind of my answer to the question is the future is about software, right? As Bill mentioned, this network is now becoming much more a software defined network. And so, not to get too techie, but a big part of software is having your DevSecOps environment, right? So you can bring your new feature, your new function, and then develop that in an agile, real-time way. And so really, whether it's the IoT lab, which you can bring sensors and IoT devices, 5G zone, where you can bring your edge-based, cloud-based software, interface those devices. I think what this innovation entrepreneurship investment has done is create an environment where, as an entrepreneur, you don't have to know how to do everything. 5G is pretty big, but you can bring your piece, whether that's a device, an edge software, machine learning algorithm, and plug it into the larger environment so that you have the ability to demonstrate to people the end-to-end application, right? So this is a great discussion, and networks are awesome. But at the end of the day, people always ask, that's cool, but what do I do with it, right? So having the ability to show and develop and frankly get feedback, right? So a big part of the App Store, right, in our iPhones is, I like this app, I don't like this app. It's that process that gives the industry feedback and allows 5G in the future. My hope is that we don't really talk about 5G. We talk about all the cool things we're doing with the network, and it's really all about the applications and the new businesses that we've created going forward.
Excellent. So go ahead.
One thing I would add is just for Indiana to continue to support laws that would allow carriers like Verizon and AT&T to quickly and efficiently deploy these networks throughout the state. I know we've got billions of dollars, both of our companies and T-Mobile, we've all got billions of dollars allocated to this investment every year. And you know, that those dollars are distributed and, you know, in the various states across the country. And we have deadlines that we have to meet to spend those dollars. And if we get held up, you know, for whatever reason where we know we're not going to meet those deadlines, what these companies do, like Verizon and AT&T, we will deploy those dollars to another state where we can meet those deadlines, because we do have to spend the dollars and we do have to get the investment out there. So, you know, be that state that allows us to get it out there quickly and efficiently. And you know, maybe some of those other states that are holding us up, you know, those dollars might be transferred to Indiana. So you know, that's probably the biggest thing, because our goal is to get this network out there as quickly as possible, because I think it's in everybody's best interest to do that.
So one question that did come in was about 5G expansion into less dense areas. Is 5G inherently population density driven, or do you see a day when wireless fiber essentially gets to everyone regardless of density of their community?
Well, in fact, you know, Verizon just received a lot of that, you know, when Bill was talking about low band, mid band, high band. You know, we just purchased about $60 billion worth of spectrum in the latest spectrum auction, and a good chunk of that spectrum is in rural areas that Verizon will be deploying. And, you know, now we do have some limitations because some of that spectrum isn't going to open up until 2023, which dictates how fast we can get it out there. But what I can say is it is happening. You know, I think you'll see the progression similar to 4G. I mean, we do have, I know Verizon has, you know, pretty good coverage across the nation in rural communities with 4G technology. And what you typically see is, you know, you kind of start out in the dense populated areas where you need to build out your capacity, and then it kind of spider webs out and out and out and out as you build out your network. And I think you'll see a similar progression with 5G.
John, AT&T offers a 5G today to about 2/3 of the state of Indiana when you look at the footprint. Now, you know, what's that going to translate to? Probably 60 to 80 megabits per second if you have a 5G capable device, right? I mean, that's the other piece of this is, you know, some people tend to sit on their phone for 5, 6, 7 years, and you don't take advantage of that new technology until you know, upgrade your handset. So, you know, 60, 80 megabits is great. That may be a lot faster than what some people are experiencing today. But then, as Melia mentioned, that mid-band spectrum starts coming online late this year and early into next. And then the characteristics of that spectrum is it doesn't go as far, but it's got a lot faster punch to it, right? So then you're at 100 meg to 150 meg, you know, if you're within 2 or 3 miles of that cell site. So yeah, I mean, it gets increasingly difficult in less sparse areas. Will millimeter wave or that high band frequency ever be really relevant in rural Indiana? I don't know. There are people and technologies that are being worked on to try to do that, but the physics of that radio spectrum is that it only goes a city block, and it's very hard to deploy the quantity of antennas that it would require to do that. Many people believe, and I think the federal government does, with all these ARP dollars, that, you know, fiber facilities are far greater from a capacity standpoint than any wireless technology. I'm a big advocate of wireless, don't get me wrong, but seeing the trend of the amount of data that's being consumed in residential houses today, the safer bet seems fiber in a lot of those respects. But your original question is, you know, should 5G only be thought about in urban areas? No, not at all. But remember that 3-layer layer cake. 5G is available in 2/3 of Indiana today, at least on the AT&T network. And then that mid-band spectrum starts coming online next year, which will be a massive increase in speeds. So no, it should not be thought about as exclusively urban. That's not the case at all.
Okay, good. We've got time for probably one more, and I'll probably direct this to Representative Manning. Also, I don't know, Molly, you may want to unmute on that. There's a question about specific incentives or tax credits related to 5G policy to promote it or to drive startup and entrepreneurship activity in 5G. Is there anything out there today or anything in the pipeline related to this?
So John, I'm not sure if there are any specific incentives or tax credits. I would have to check on that. But as has been mentioned, we do have a lot of incentives more broadly, of course, for entrepreneurs and businesses working to do those sorts of things, and lots of business incubators and things that are state supported. But as we move forward, I'd certainly be interested in looking at that sort of thing as we talk about this technology and we continue to be a leader. What's the next step, right? How else can we support, bring more investment, and encourage more innovation from Hoosiers themselves and support that legislation? So I see that came from Doug. So Doug, be happy to chat with you about that if you want to reach out.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think this is a perfect opportunity to end on time. I just would like to thank everyone for joining us today, especially thank our panelists here, Representative Manning, Bill Soards from AT&T, Melia Carter from Verizon, and Sean Hendrix from the 5G zone, and Molly for putting this together. She always does a great job of making all of us look good, and I want to thank you for that, Molly. And Jen, always your behind the scenes work and making these come together. So thanks, everyone. Check out indianatechnology.org for the latest updates, and I want to thank everyone for participating today.
And I would love to give a special shout out to the legislators who joined us in addition to Representative Manning. We had Senator Boots, Representative Nagel, Representative Baird, and Representative Pierce all tune in. So thanks so much for joining us, and please reach out if we can answer any questions or help further. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.